Mira Novak had exactly 4 Earth minutes to get to advanced quantum simulation theory before Professor Krell-Thor noticed her absence. Again. She sprinted down the gleaming corridor of the Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences, dodging a gelatinous Krulian who was oozing their way to class and narrowly avoiding collision with a hovering Zentari whose 17 ice dogs all swiveled to track her mad dash. "Watch where you're going, human." The Zentari buzzed in disapproval. "Sorry," Mira called back, not slowing down. The Academy's gravity was calibrated to the galactic standard, about 0.8 Earth-G, which meant she could run faster but had less control. Another reason aliens thought humans were clumsy. The massive doors to Lecture Hall 7 were already closing as she approached. Mira slid through the narrowing gap with seconds to spare, only to trip over her own momentum and tumble down the steps of the amphitheater-style classroom. She came to a stop at the bottom, a tablet clattering across the floor and landing directly at the tentacles of Professor Krell-Thor. The 8-limbed Octuvian academic peered down at her through compound eyes that reflected Mira's disheveled appearance in multiple angles. "Miss Novak," he gurgled through his translator, "so pleased you could join us with your usual human entrance." The classroom erupted in chittering laughter. 200 of the galaxy's brightest students, and not one of them human besides her. "Sorry, Professor," Mira mumbled, retrieving her tablet and finding her seat in the front row. The only available seat, because no one wanted to sit near the human with her outdated wetware processing unit, otherwise known as a brain. The Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences was the most prestigious school in 17 star systems. Getting accepted had been a miracle, the first human ever admitted to the computational track. 6 months in, and Mira was still trying to prove she belonged. As I was saying before MS. Novak's interruption, Professor Krell-Thor continued, his tentacles manipulating the holographic display. "Today we will be discussing the theoretical framework for solving quantum entanglement simulations across dimensional barriers." Mira quickly activated her tablet, the primitive device earning sneers from her classmates with their neural interfaces and quantum processors. She didn't care. She took notes the old-fashioned way, with a stylus on a screen. From behind her came a quiet hiss. "Human, your processing is leaking again." Mira didn't turn around. She knew it was Vex Law, the Arcturian prodigy with an ego bigger than his homeworld's 3 suns combined. "It's called thinking. Vex. You should try it sometime. Why use such an inefficient method?" He scoffed. "My neural implants are processing 16 subspace algorithms while I'm sitting here. And yet you still have time to bother me." Impressive multitasking. Professor Krell-Thor's tentacles slapped the podium. "To where's I?" "Since some of us are engaging in extracurricular discussions, perhaps this is the perfect time to announce this semester's final challenge." The room fell silent. The final challenge was legendary, a computational problem so difficult that it sorted the merely brilliant from the truly exceptional. "As tradition dictates, I will present a simulation that has never been successfully resolved by any student in Academy history." His eye clusters focused on Mira. "Though I hardly expect our human participant to comprehend its complexity." More laughter. Mira sank lower in her seat. "The challenge this year," Professor Krell-Thor continued, "will be the Kasskian Paradox Simulation. For those unfamiliar, it is a quantum state problem that has stumped the greatest minds of the Galactic Computational Consortium for over 3 centuries. Mira had read about it. A simulation so complex that even the most advanced quantum computers could only process it for thousands of years before reaching a solution. The trick was finding a shortcut if one existed. Those wishing to participate should register by the end of the lunar cycle. Professor Krell-Thor finished. "Though I warn you, no student has completed it in under 3 minutes, and the Academy record stands at 2 minutes, 47 seconds. His eyes swiveled to Mira. "I would advise certain students not to waste their time." The dismissal gong sounded. As students filed out, Mira sat there, fingers hovering over her tablet. Without looking up, she said, "I'd like to register, Professor." The room, not quite empty, fell silent again. MS Novak, Professor Krell Thor gurgled with what sounded like amusement. This challenge requires quantum computational skills that humans simply do not possess. I'd still like to try. The professor's tentacles twisted in the Octuvian equivalent of a shrug. Very well. It will be educational for the others to see the limitations of non-augmented species. As Mira gathered her things, she heard Vexlor's distinct laugh. The human thinks she can solve what I cannot. This will be entertaining. Mira clutched her tablet tighter and walked out with her head high. She'd show them. She had to. The Kasskian Paradox Simulation, explained Professor Krell Thor the next day, addressing the 37 students who had registered for the challenge, originated when scientists attempted to model the behavior of particles during the formation of a Class 9 neutron star. Holographic displays flickered around the room, showing complex equations that Mira recognized from her late-night study sessions. The simulation creates a virtual universe with its own physical laws, the professor continued. The goal is to stabilize the neutron star formation without allowing a singularity collapse or radiation dispersal. In essence, you must find the perfect balance point in an inherently unstable system. Mira jotted notes while most others simply downloaded the information directly to their neural interfaces. Her tablet felt increasingly obsolete in this room full of biotechnological wonders. The challenge will take place in 14 standard days, Professor Krell Thor announced. During that time, you may use any academy resources to prepare. Vexlor, his blue-scaled skin shimmering with bioluminescent confidence, raised a clawed hand. Professor, will we be graded on a curve? It hardly seems fair to rate those of us with quantum neural interfaces alongside lesser computational systems. His yellow eyes flickered toward Mira. The professor's tentacles curled in amusement. Excellence knows no handicap, Mr. Vexlor. However, I should note that in the 3 centuries this simulation has been attempted, no purely biological entity has even managed to initialize the program correctly, let alone solve it. In more snickering. Mira kept her eyes on her tablet. Now, continued Krell Thor, let me introduce the current record holders who have agreed to serve as mentors. 3 figures entered from a side door. The first was a towering crystalline being that Mira recognized as Athena 7, one of the silicon-based lifeforms from the Andromeda galaxy. They were renowned for their precise, methodical approach to problem-solving. This is graduate fellow Torix, said the professor. 3 years ago, they completed the simulation in 2 minutes and 47 seconds, the Academy record. Torix's crystalline structure refracted light across the room as they nodded acknowledgement. Next, graduate fellow Grun. Grun shuffled forward, his grey, wrinkled skin hanging in folds that nearly obscured his small eyes. He was a Melgorian, from a high-gravity world where physical movement was difficult, so their species had evolved extraordinary mental capabilities instead. And finally, academic directors Litrex. The third figure didn't move so much as rearrange itself a swarm of what looked like metallic insects forming a roughly humanoid shape. It's a collective intelligence with distributed processing capabilities. Carl. Each will be available for consultation, though I doubt most of you will approach their level of achievement, Krell Thor concluded. As the session ended, Mira approached Grun, who alone among the mentors didn't seem to radiate contempt for her. Excuse me, she said. I wonder if you might have some advice for, well, someone with my limitations. Grun's small eyes blinked slowly. Human, his translator rasped, you face an impossible task. Your species' computational methods are, he searched for a diplomatic term, unique, meaning primitive, meaning non-linear. Grun sighed, a wheezing sound. The others will tell you to approach this systematically, processing each variable sequentially at quantum speeds. But you cannot compete on those terms. So what should I do? Grun leaned forward, his voice dropping. What makes humans interesting is not your computational power, but your pattern recognition. You see connections where others calculate probabilities. Before Mira could ask more, Vexlor approached, flanked by 2 other students, a multi-limbed Dorsian and a hovering sphere that contained a gaseous Xynthi. Giving charity to the primate Grun, Vexlor sneered. How compassionate. I'm offering perspective, Vex law. Something your predictable algorithms often lack. Vex law's scales darkened in irritation. My algorithms have earned me the highest marks in this academy for 3 cycles. And yet, Grun replied mildly, you've never solved the Kasskian Paradox. The Arcturian's jaw tightened. Neither has the human, and neither will she. He turned to Mira. Why even attempt this, Novak? To humiliate yourself publicly instead of privately for a change. Mira felt her cheeks flush. Maybe I'll surprise you. The only surprise will be if you manage to turn on your simulation console without assistance. He leaned closer, scales shimmering with contempt. You don't belong here, human. Your species isn't ready for this level of computation. As he walked away, the synthesphere bobbed in agreement. Your probability of success is 0.0000073% human. Statistically negligible. Mira looked down at her tablet, with its simple interface and basic programming tools. Maybe they were right. What chance did she have against beings whose brains were literally built for quantum computation? Don't mind Vex law, said Grun after the others left. He fears what he doesn't understand. What's there to understand? Humans are computational lightweights compared to everyone here. Grun's wrinkles rearranged into what might have been a smile. Perhaps. But sometimes a different approach matters more than raw processing power. You evolve to recognize patterns and make intuitive leaps. Use that. As Mira walked back to her dormitory, she wondered what Grun meant. How could human intuition possibly compete with quantum neural networks? The answer, she suspected, wasn't in any textbook. Mira's dormitory room was half the size of those assigned to species requiring specialized environments. Her roommate Zikra, a purple-skinned amphibian from a water-heavy world, kept their side perpetually misted. The result was that Mira's belongings were in a constant state of developing mold. You've been staring at those equations for 6 hours, 23 minutes and 12 seconds, Zikra noted without looking up from her own studies. Her large, multifaceted eyes could focus independently, one on her work, one on Mira. You've been counting? Mira rubbed her eyes. No, I simply know what time you began and what time it is now. Zikra tilted her head. Is this another example of human imprecision? It's an example of human figures of speech, Mira sighed. And yes, I've been at it too long without progress. She had covered her wall with diagrams of the Kasskian Paradox. Unlike her classmates, who could visualize multidimensional models in their augmented minds, Mira needed to externalize her thinking sticky notes, scrawled equations, even strings connecting different concepts. Zikra's eyes swiveled to take in the chaotic display. Your method is highly inefficient. My neural matrix could process these variables in 1.7 seconds. And yet, Mira said, tapping her stylus against her teeth, after 3 centuries of the most efficient minds in the galaxy trying, nobody's solved it in less than 2 minutes and 47 seconds. A reasonable minimum given the computational requirements. Mira stood up and paced, following a path between the strings crisscrossing her room. But what if the answer isn't about computing faster? What if there's another approach entirely? That is highly improbable. Improbable doesn't mean impossible. Mira stopped in front of her diagram. What if we're all trying to solve the wrong problem? Zikra's skin rippled in confusion. The parameters of the simulation are quite clear. Yes, but what if the real test isn't to solve the simulation exactly as given? What if there's a loophole? A shortcut? That would be Zikra searched for the word cheating? Not cheating. Lateral thinking. Humans are good at that, even if our computational skills are lacking. Mira returned to her tablet and began searching through the history of the Kasskian Paradox. Most students focused on optimizing their approach to the simulation itself, but what if she looked at the simulation's design instead? 3 hours later, as Zikra entered her nightly hydration cycle, Mira bolted upright. That's it. Please. What is it? Zikra burbled from inside her mist chamber. I need to see the original simulation code. The Academy archives would have it, but they're restricted to graduate researchers and faculty. Mira grinned. Then I need to find a sympathetic graduate researcher. The next morning, Mira tracked down Groon in the Academy's Arboretum, where the high-gravity section allowed the Melgorian to move somewhat comfortably among the dense vegetation from his homeworld. You want to see the original simulation code? Groon wheezed after hearing her request. Why? I have a theory. But I need to confirm it. Groon studied her with those small, deep-set eyes. Most competitors focus on processing power, not the code itself. And not most competitors. I can't win on their terms, so I need to change the game. The Melgorian was silent for a long moment. Your approach is unorthodox. Is that a no? It's an observation. Groon's wrinkles shifted. Very well. Meet me in Archive Room 12 after final bell. Bring your tablet. The original code for the Kasskian Paradox was massive millions of lines written 3 centuries ago by a team of the galaxy's finest computational theorists. Most of it was in languages Mira had never seen before. This will take days to analyze, she muttered, scrolling through the files Groon had accessed for her. You have 8 days until the challenge, Groon reminded her, and this is assuming your theory has merit. It does. Mira wasn't entirely sure, but confidence was all she had. I just need to find the right section. For the next week, Mira barely attended classes. She spent every waking hour in Archive Room 12, poring over the simulation code, tracing its logic paths, searching for the hidden flaw she suspected was there. The night before the challenge, she was still searching, her eyes red-rimmed, her fingers cramped from typing. You should rest, Groon told her on his final check-in. Even humans require sleep for optimal cognitive function. I'm close, Mira insisted. I can feel it. Intuition. Groon sounded skeptical. Pattern recognition. She pointed to a section of code. Look here and here. And here. See the pattern? Groon leaned forward, eyes narrowing. That's unexpected. It's deliberate, Mira said. The simulation isn't designed to be solvable through brute force computation. It's a test of insight. If you're right. I am. Astiz. Then you have found what 3 centuries of the finest computational minds missed. Mira saved the relevant code to her tablet and stood, stretching her stiff muscles. That's the point, isn't it? Sometimes you need a different kind of mind to see what everyone else has missed. The day of the challenge arrived. The Academy's Grand Amphitheater was filled with students, faculty, and even representatives from various scientific institutions across the galaxy. The Kasskian Paradox Challenge was, after all, a spectator sport among the intellectually elite. In the preparation room, competitors were setting up their equipment. Vex Law had brought a neural amplifier, an illegal enhancement that everyone pretended not to notice. The synthesphere had expanded to 3 times its normal size, its gaseous brain given maximum volume for computation. Others had quantum stabilizers, dimensional anchors, and all manner of computational aids. Mira had her tablet. That's it. Vex Law mocked when he saw her. You're attempting the challenge with that antique? It has everything I need. Mira didn't look up. You're an embarrassment to this academy, he hissed. You should withdraw now and save yourself the humiliation. Before she could respond, Professor Krell Thor's tentacles waved for attention. Competitors, take your positions. The challenge begins in 5 minutes. As they filed into the amphitheater, Groon caught Mira's eye from the mentor's section. He gave her the Melgorian equivalent of a thumbs up, a slow blink of both eyes. Mira took her place at one of the 37 consoles arranged in a circle. The audience murmured at the sight of a human among the competitors, many placing bets on how quickly she would fail. Professor Krell Thor moved to the center. The Kasskian Paradox Simulation will now commence. The competitors, initialize your systems. Mira powered up her tablet and connected it to the Academy network. The simulation will begin in 3, 2, 1, start. The amphitheater darkened as 37 versions of the same quantum simulation sprang to life, filling the room with holographic displays of neutron formations, particle flows, and dimensional matrices. Vex Law was already deep in computation, his scales glowing with the effort of his neural processors. The Shinthi sphere pulsed with complex calculations. Around the circle, beings of all forms were immersed in the most difficult computational challenge in known space. Mira took a deep breath and opened the code she'd prepared. The grand amphitheater hummed with the collective computational effort of 36 beings straining against the limits of quantum mathematics. Above each console, holographic displays showed their progress through the Kasskian Paradox, swirling vortices of simulated particles attempting to form stable neutron stars without collapsing into singularities. Vex Law's display showed the most progress. His neural implants, almost certainly boosted beyond legal limits, were processing variables at staggering speeds. Sweat beaded on his blue scales as the mental effort taxed even his enhanced brain. The FINA 7 student was close behind, their crystalline structure vibrating as it channeled computational energy. The Shinthi sphere had expanded to its maximum volume, gaseous brain matter swirling in complex patterns. And then there was Mira, staring at her tablet, seemingly doing nothing. The human appears to be experiencing technical difficulties, Professor Krell Thor commented dryly to the audience, who chittered in amusement. Mira ignored them all. She had spent the last week combing through the original simulation code, looking for what everyone else had missed. Now she was ready. While the others attacked the simulation head-on, processing quintillions of variables to find the perfect balance point, Mira opened a simple text editor on her tablet. She wrote 12 lines of code. In the audience, a Centurion leaned over to their companion. Is she surrendering already? She's not even attempting the simulation. Mira connected her tablet to the simulation console and uploaded her code. She took a deep breath and pressed execute. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then her holographic display flickered. The swirling vortex of particles froze, the equations rearranged themselves, and suddenly, impossibly, the neutron star stabilized, achieving perfect equilibrium. A green light flashed above her console. Simulation complete. 0012. The amphitheater fell silent. Mira had just solved the Kasskian Paradox in 12 seconds. Professor Krell Thor's tentacles went completely rigid, the Octuvian equivalent of shocked disbelief. That is impossible. Vex Law's head whipped around, his concentration broken. What did you do? He demanded, his voice cracking. Mira stood up, suddenly aware that every eye in the amphitheater was fixed on her. I solved it, she said simply. Cheating. Vex Law roared, slamming his console. She must have hacked the system. There is no way a human could. I didn't hack anything, Mira interrupted. I just saw what everyone else missed. Professor Krell Thor floated over to her console, his compound eyes scanning the completion certificate. 12 seconds, he gurgled. The previous record was 2 minutes and 47 seconds. She couldn't have solved it legitimately, insisted the Shinthi competitor, their sphere contracting in agitation. Let us see, said Krell Thor. He connected Mira's tablet to the main projection system, displaying her code for all to see. The 12 lines appeared, elegantly simple against the backdrop of the massively complex simulation. For a moment there was confusion. Then, gradually, understanding dawned on the faces of the most advanced computational minds in the audience. By the 7 singularities, whispered Torix, the crystalline graduate fellow. She didn't try to solve the simulation at all. No, agreed Grun, a wheezing chuckle escaping him. She solved the simulation's creator. Vex Law stared at the code, his scales paling. What is this? What did she do? Professor Krell Thor's tentacles were moving again, rippling with what might have been reluctant admiration. Ms. Novak, would you care to explain your approach to the assembly? Mira swallowed hard. Public speaking had never been her forte, especially not in front of a crowd of beings who had, until 12 seconds ago, considered her intellectually inferior. She cleared her throat. I took a different approach. Different approach? Echoed Professor Krell Thor, his tentacles curling skeptically. That would be a considerable understatement, Ms. Novak. Bah! The amphitheater remained hushed, hundreds of the galaxy's brightest minds leaning forward to hear how a human had shattered a 3-century-old record. Mira stood straighter, finding confidence in her success. Everyone approaches the Kasskian Paradox the same way, trying to balance all the variables to create a stable neutron star. But that's exactly what the simulation designers expected. She walked to the center of the floor, her tablet projecting her simple code onto the main display. So instead of fighting the simulation, I examined its foundation. You analyzed the source code? Professor Krell Thor's voice carried a note of surprise. That's not part of the challenge parameters. You never said we couldn't. Mira smiled. The rules state we must resolve the simulation, not that we have to do it by brute forcing the calculations. Right from his console, Vex Law hissed. This is semantic trickery. This, Mira countered, is lateral thinking, something humans excel at. She highlighted a section of her code. The Kasskian Paradox was designed 3 centuries ago by some of the finest computational minds in the galaxy. But they built it with a fundamental assumption that anyone attempting to solve it would approach it as a straightforward physics simulation. The audience murmured as understanding began to dawn. But I noticed something in the original code, Mira continued. Every 50 computational cycles, the simulation checks its own stability parameters against an expected outcome. It's searching for a specific pattern of neutron arrangement. Grun nodded slowly from the mentors section. You identified the validation sequence. Exactly. The simulation isn't actually running a full quantum physics model that would require more processing power than the galaxy could provide. Instead, it's checking if your approach matches predetermined correct patterns at various checkpoints. Professor Krell Thor's tentacles twisted in agitation. Even if that were true, those patterns are encrypted and buried within billions of lines of code. They are, Mira agreed. But they follow a mathematical sequence, a signature of sorts from the original programmers. Once I identified the pattern, I didn't need to solve the physics problem. I just needed to feed the simulation the outcomes it was expecting. She pulled up another display showing a simple geometric sequence. This is the validation pattern. My code doesn't simulate neutron star formation, it just submits the correct validation responses in sequence. The amphitheater erupted in a chaos of voices. That's not solving the problem, protested Vex Law. That's circumventing it. Is it? Mira challenged. The problem, as stated, was to stabilize the neutron star simulation. I did that. The fact that I found an efficient path rather than the expected one doesn't invalidate my solution. Professor Krell Thor raised his tentacles for silence. This is unprecedented. For the first time, he seemed at a loss for words. You identified a pattern that thousands of computational experts missed for 3 centuries. Because they were all looking for the same thing, Mira explained. They approached it as quantum physicists or computational theorists. I approached it as a human looking at a puzzle. She highlighted another section of the code. Say, did she see this recurring pattern? It's not random, it's a signature. The simulation creators embedded their own bias into the code. They assumed the only valid approach was a computational one. The FINA 7 student who had been closest to completion spoke up, their crystalline form refracting light as they moved. But the physics model is still valid. The computation is still necessary. Of course, Mira agreed. If we were actually trying to stabilize a real neutron star, we'd need all that computation. But this is a simulation, designed by beings with specific expectations. The true challenge wasn't the physics, it was recognizing the pattern within the test itself. Grun's wheezing laugh cut through the murmurs. The human is correct. The Kasskian Paradox has always been more than a computational challenge, it's a test of insight. For 3 centuries, we've been so focused on optimizing our processing that we missed the shortcut hidden in plain sight. Professor Krell Thor studied Mira's code for a long moment. Ms. Novak, you realize what you've done here. You've rendered one of the galaxy's most prestigious computational challenges obsolete. No, Mira shook her head. I've transformed it. Now it can be what it should have been all along, not just a test of raw processing power, but of creative problem solving. She looked around the amphitheater, meeting the compound eyes, eye stalks, sensory clusters and visual organs of beings from across the galaxy. Humans may not have your computational speed or your neural interfaces or your quantum processors, but we see patterns. We make intuitive leaps. We think outside established parameters. That's our contribution to galactic science. For a moment, the amphitheater was silent again. Then, from the back row, someone began to tap appendages to gather the galactic equivalent of applause. Others joined in, the sound swelling until it filled the vast chamber. Not everyone was applauding. Vex Law and a few others sat rigidly at their consoles, scales and appendages and exoskeletons radiating disapproval. But they were the minority. As the applause died down, Professor Krell Thor raised his tentacles. The challenge results stand. Mira Novak has completed the Kasskian Paradox Simulation in 12 seconds, a new Academy record. His eye clusters focused on her. And perhaps more significantly, she has demonstrated that there is more than one valid approach to computational theory. No, you're still approaching it sequentially. Mira suppressed a laugh as she watched Vex Law attempt to fold an origami crane. The Arcturian's clawed fingers, so precise when manipulating holographic controls, fumbled with the paper. 3 weeks after the Kasskian Paradox Challenge, the Academy had undergone a subtle but significant shift. A new course had been added to the curriculum, non-linear problem-solving approaches. Mira, improbably, was its teaching assistant. I don't understand the purpose of this exercise, grumbled Vex Law. His neural implants, currently inactive, couldn't help him with the physical dexterity required. That's exactly the purpose, Mira explained, gently adjusting his folding technique, to engage with problems in ways your usual computational methods can't address. The classroom was filled with beings of various species, all struggling with the same task. Some, like the gaseous Synthi, couldn't even hold the paper and were paired with robotic manipulators they had to direct through verbal commands. There are 17 more efficient ways to create a paper bird, argued a Zentari student, eye stalks twitching in frustration. But none as satisfying, countered Grun, who had eagerly accepted a position co-teaching the class. The elderly Melgorian moved slowly around the room, his wrinkled appendages surprisingly nimble as he demonstrated the proper folding technique. At the back of the room, Professor Krell Thor observed, his tentacles occasionally taking notes. The Octuvian had become Mira's unlikely champion after the challenge, defending her approach to the academic board and insisting on curricular changes. The Kasskian Paradox was a wake-up call, he had told his colleagues. For 3 centuries we've been optimizing for computational efficiency while ignoring alternative problem-solving methodologies. The human approach has merit. Not everyone agreed. The Academy remained divided between traditionalists, who viewed Mira's solution as clever trickery, and progressives, who saw it as a revolutionary approach to computational theory. Time's up, Mira called. Let's see your results. Around the room, students held up their attempts at origami cranes. Some were recognizable birds, others looked more like crumpled disasters. Vex Law's was somewhere in between, technically correct in its folds, but lacking any grace or symmetry. Well done, everyone, Mira said encouragingly. Now, who can tell me the point of this exercise? A crystalline Fina 7 student raised an appendage. To demonstrate that physical manipulation requires different cognitive approaches than pure computation. Close, Mira nodded. It's to show that sometimes following a rigid, step-by-step process isn't enough. You need to develop a feel for the problem and intuitive understanding that goes beyond sequential instructions. But intuition is inefficient, objected Vex Law. It's an evolutionary shortcut for species that lack proper computational abilities. Is it? Mira picked up her own crane, perfectly formed. How long did it take you to create your crane, following the instructions precisely? Vex Law's scales darkened slightly. 7 minutes and 23 seconds. And it took me less than a minute, Mira pointed out. Not because I'm faster at following instructions, But because I've developed an intuitive understanding of how the paper behaves, I don't need to think through each fold consciously. That's just muscle memory and practice. Bexlaw countered. Exactly. Mira grinned. And that's something your neural implants can't give you. Some knowledge can only be gained through experience, through failure, through developing a feel for the problem. After class, Professor Krell Thor motioned for Mira to join him in the corridor. An interesting session, Ms. Novak, he gurgled, though I suspect some of our students remain unconvinced. Change takes time, Mira shrugged, especially for beings who've spent their lives believing in the superiority of pure computation. Indeed. The professor's eye clusters studied her. The academic board has asked me to inform you that your application for full admission has been approved. Your tuition scholarship will continue, and you've been granted access to graduate-level courses. Mira felt a wave of relief wash over her. Until now, her status had been provisional exchange student. This meant the academy officially recognized her as belonging. Thank you, Professor. I won't disappoint you. I should hope not. You've already completely upended 3 centuries of computational theory. I shudder to think what you might accomplish with a proper education. There was a hint of humor in his gurgling voice. As the professor moved away on his tentacles, Grun approached, his slow movements belying his obvious excitement. Have you heard? The Melgorian wheezed. The Computational Consortium is reassessing all of its grand challenge simulations in light of your approach. They're calling it the Novak paradigm, the systematic search for hidden patterns in computational structures. Mira blushed. That's unexpected. You should be proud. Very few beings manage to create an entirely new paradigm, Grun continued, his voice warm with genuine admiration, especially not in their first semester at the academy. Mira fidgeted with the origami crane still in her hand. I just saw the problem differently. It wasn't that revolutionary. That's precisely why it was revolutionary, Grun countered, settling his aged form against the corridor wall. The greatest advances often come not from those who know all the rules, but from those who aren't constrained by them. Your human perspective brought something essential that we had been missing. As they spoke, a group of first-year students passed by, their whispered conversations halting momentarily as they recognized Mira. She caught fragments of their awed murmurs. That's her. The human who solved it. Novak paradigm before they continued down the hallway. I'm not sure I'll ever get used to that, Mira admitted. Fame? Grun's wrinkled face crinkled in amusement. Or respect? And both, I guess. 6 months ago, I was just a scholarship student from Earth who everyone expected to fail. Now I'm teaching a class and apparently have a paradigm named after me. The universe works in unexpected patterns, much like your approach to the Kasskian Paradox. Grun's multiple eyes twinkled. Speaking of which, I've been meaning to ask, how did you first see the solution? What made you look beyond the sequential approach? Mira considered the question, turning the paper crane over in her hands. It was something my grandmother used to say. She was a quilt maker back on Earth, traditional patterns, all done by hand. When I was struggling with complex equations as a child, she told me that sometimes you need to step back and look at the whole pattern, not just the individual stitches. She smiled at the memory. During the challenge, when everyone else was focusing on optimizing individual computational paths, I remembered her words. I stopped trying to solve the problem directly and instead looked for patterns in the structure of the problem itself. Your grandmother sounds like a wise being, Grun observed. She was. She would have loved this place, all these different species, different minds. She always said that diversity of thought was humanity's greatest strength. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Senjira, the Zenith student who had shown Mira unexpected kindness during her first difficult weeks at the academy. Mira, I've been looking everywhere for you, Senjira exclaimed, her luminous skin pulsing with excitement. Have you heard? The Intergalactic Science Council wants to invite you to present at their annual symposium. This is unprecedented for a first-year student. Me? But I. Don't you dare say you're not qualified, Senjira cut her off. The entire computational community is buzzing about your approach. They're already finding applications for the Novak paradigm in quantum navigation, dimensional folding, even consciousness transference. Mira felt a flutter of both pride and apprehension. It's all happening so fast. That's how paradigm shifts work, Grun interjected gently. Once a new perspective proves valuable, minds across the galaxy adapt quickly. Senjaira's expression grew more serious. There's something else. The Arctuvian Science Division has requested a meeting with you. They believe your approach might help with the stellar decay crisis. Mira's eyes widened. Everyone at the Academy knew about the crisis, a recently discovered phenomenon causing accelerated decay in certain star types, threatening populated systems throughout the galaxy. The best computational models had failed to predict or explain it. But I'm not an astrophysicist, Mira protested. I wouldn't even know where to begin. Perhaps that's exactly why they want you, Grun suggested. Sometimes the greatest insights come from outside the established field. Mira looked down at the origami crane in her hand, a simple thing made of folded paper, yet complete in its own way. In that moment she understood something fundamental about her place at the Academy and in the wider universe. 6 months ago, I was afraid I didn't belong here, she said quietly. That humans weren't advanced enough, that we didn't think the right way. And now? Senjaira prompted. Now I understand that there is no right way to think. The universe is too complex, too varied for any single approach to be sufficient. We need all of our perspectives, the computational precision of the Arcturians, the multidimensional awareness of the Octuvians, the pattern recognition of humans, the collective consciousness of the Zenith. Mira carefully placed the origami crane on a nearby ledge, where it stood as a small but perfect testament to what could be created when different approaches converged. I may have solved one paradox, she continued, but the real challenge, the one we all face together, is learning to see through each other's eyes, to combine our perspectives into something greater than any one species could achieve alone. Grun's wrinkled face spread into a wide smile. And that, young human, is why the Academy truly needs you. As the three of them walked together down the corridor, the elderly Melgorian, the luminous Zenith, and the human who had changed how the galaxy approached computation, Mira felt a sense of belonging stronger than anything she had ever known. She wasn't just a token human or a curiosity anymore. She was exactly where she needed to be, bringing her unique perspective to the greatest challenges of the universe. And somewhere, across the vast distance of space, she liked to think her grandmother would be proud, not because her granddaughter had created a paradigm that bore her name, but because she had remembered the most important lesson. Sometimes, to solve the most complex problems, you need to see the whole pattern.